I just got up every day with the intention that I was going to feel this pain because that's where my son was. My son was in the love, he was in the pain, he was in the emotion.
Janet Ropp lost her 19-year-old son James to a Xanax overdose on October 13th of 2018. She asked me if she could join me on my podcast as a way to mark the third-year anniversary of James's death. She wanted to share with other mothers and fathers about the things that have helped her cope with the loss of her son. I have found that we mothers who have lost children in this way have so much in common with one another, and that we can all learn from each other. I had a remarkable conversation with Janet. I hope you enjoy it. Well, Janet, thank you so much for joining me today.
Well, thank you for having me.
I was really curious after you contacted me and told me a little bit about your story and James's story and the journey that you've been on. I just thought so many of the moms who listen to our podcast who are dealing with grief and loss could really benefit from hearing your story.
I do agree. When I did lose James, I realized that there was not a lot of support out there for mothers or parents. I had searched several different avenues trying to find some support, and I couldn't find anything. I just ended up looking under every stone, calling anybody that I could get a hold of, reaching out through the internet, just trying to get, I needed direction. I needed some other parents.
Yeah, well, I was going to ask. So James was just 19 and he died a few months after my Emily in October of 2018, October 13th to be exact. You know, at that time, there were already a lot of people. I mean, there's 223 people that die of overdose every day in this country. I think the number back then was around 180 something. So there are a lot of people that are going through this, but what were you looking for? You know, when you said you were trying to figure out like some kind of direction, what were you looking for?
At that point, I did not really know what I was looking for. I just knew that I had to find healing. I had to find a path or an avenue to heal my broken heart because I was teeter-tottering every day, trying to stay afloat. I was trying to keep myself balanced. So I was just looking for anything that could direct me on how to get through this. How do I heal my heart and still want to try to live? How do I proceed forward in my life? Who am I now? I just had so many questions, and I was just searching for anybody that had experience or education that could help guide me on where to go, what to do from this point forward.
I think those feelings are universal after the loss of a child. I mean, that is exactly how I felt as well. I remember a couple of moms who'd lost children, not to overdose in other ways, reaching out to me. And I wanted answers from them. Like, how do you go on? How do you cope? How do you navigate this? And I found that nobody could really like give me a succinct answer.
No, they couldn't. Because what I learned is that everyone handles grief differently. It affects every single person so differently. So everybody's journey is completely different. I think I needed at that time to find a little piece of something that could make sense to me. I think my whole world was chopped up into little pieces, and I've explained it this way a few times to people, is that I just felt like a tidal wave had come in and crashed down on our family, and all people in my family were just swimming around trying to reach the surface, and we were trying to find each other in this destruction. And that's really what I would explain it to people. It was it just felt like a huge tidal wave.
I think
It
that's
is.
so accurate, such an accurate description. So tell me about James. Tell me his story.
James was my second born child. He was very energetic, very energetic. He was always a blonde boy, very cute, handsome kid. And he was diagnosed with ADHD at a young age. And I felt kind of a little bullied, I guess, by the school system to have to medicate, which I didn't really want to do. I wasn't really comfortable with that. So he kind of spent some years on and off of medications. And on some level, the medications did help. It did help get him focused, and his grades were better, but it also kind of stole his spirit. It seemed to kind of leave him a little, it just, he just didn't have that same vibrancy about him. That was the piece that I always struggled with is this good for him? Is this not good for him? He got to a point as a young teen where he didn't really want to take the medication anymore. We took him off, and he did really well. And it wasn't, but I think when he was about 14, maybe 14, is when I learned that he had started,
Self-medicating, right? And I think that that's really common, especially among kids with ADHD. First of all, they become very comfortable at a young age taking pills, and obviously the ADHD brain is a little bit different than other people's brains. What did James start with once he started experimenting with illicit drugs?
Well, he always kind of dabbled with marijuana. And I honestly do not know the full scope of all the medications or the drugs that he did try. But I do know that he passed away of a Xanax overdose. So I do feel that he had some drive toward taking more of the downer medications, the downer drugs. That seemed to be what he gravitated toward.
And this is something we don't hear a lot about. We hear a lot about opioid overdoses, fentanyl laced medications or illicit drugs, counterfeit pills, that kind of thing. We hear more now about meth overdoses. We don't hear a lot about Xanax overdoses. Do you know how common they are? What have you learned?
They are very common. I did not learn at first when I learned that my son had passed away. The cops had told me he died of a fentanyl overdose. And I was really shocked by this. I did a lot of research on it. I asked a lot of questions to his friends. It just didn't seem right. That what they were telling me just did not seem accurate for my son. And it wasn't until about 6 weeks later that the police had told me that he actually died of a Xanax overdose. That the first testings that they had taken gave him a false positive. So I think once I learned that he had died of a Xanax overdose, I felt a little more relieved. I know that sounds crazy, but it just seemed more like his style or his.
It made more sense to you.
Yes, it made more sense to me. So I don't think I researched that any further. It was the fentanyl that just threw me over. I never heard of him using or dabbling with anything like that.
Did you know that was he addicted? Did he get treatment? What did you go through with him?
Oh gosh, yes. Well, I myself have been in recovery for codependency for probably 20 years.
And James's father suffers from alcoholism?
Yes, his father is a drug addict and an alcoholic. He's a great guy, great man. He just struggles with the addiction.
And don't you think so much of this is genetic?
I think some of it is genetic. I can see how it can be almost generational, or yes, I can see where it's genetic and some environmental. detrimental to, I think.
Right. There are a number of factors, right? Personality, genetics, environment, all of it. It's just like whatever the perfect combination is. So you knew he had struggled with substance use before the overdose?
Yes. And I had gotten both of my children into a recovery program here in Houston called Cornerstone. It is for families who are struggling with a teen who's addicted or challenging something in their lives, such as, and it can be anything ranging from drugs or alcohol to porn to depression. So we were in this program for many years, and I had James in rehabs several times. I had driven him to Dallas at one point. He had been in rehabs here in Houston a couple of times, and so I also had him in a recovery program. And he just was a person who would do great when he was really on track, working a program, had support of his peers. He would do wonderful. And then it just wouldn't take anything but a phone call, and he would be gone. I had always a strict rule in the house is that, you can't use drugs and alcohol in this house and live here. So when he did use or wanted to use, he would disappear and stay gone for, I don't even know, month, 2 months at some point. He would then return home and we would get him into rehab, get him sobered up, try to get him back on track. So this cycle went on for several years in his teenage.
What did this do to you?
I just thank God that I had support for me. I had my original recovery support group people that I leaned on tremendously, but then I was also in Cornerstone too, the family recovery group, and I had several families and parents, and I was very involved, and I leaned on them a lot. I mean, it tore me up. I can remember praying a lot when James would be gone from the house and just asking that, God look over him. Somebody watch out for him, because there's just nothing more I could do. I felt like I was doing everything in my power to help him. And there was so much of it that just wasn't up to me. When he decided to use, he was going to use. It was scary. It was very scary, and it was very difficult, and it was very challenging. I'm glad I had so much support around me during that time.
I can relate to that. Some of the issues with my daughter started when she was, in her teenage years, and you just feel like you're fighting for them, and you feel like you're almost the only one fighting for them, right? Like they're not fighting for themselves. And you can see as an adult, like their brains aren't fully developed. And you can see as an adult, like the choices they're making only lead to pain. But you can't stop it. I mean, I think that's the most frustrating thing. I guess I learned through the experiences I went through with my daughter is how I don't have control over another human being, even my own kids.
Yeah. And that's exactly how I felt. I just felt so powerless so much of the time. And I just couldn't reach him. I just could not reach him no matter what I did. If I yelled, if I pleaded, if I, took his, material things away, I could not reach him. And it was just so frustrating because I knew he was headed down a dark road, but I never would have thought ever that there was death down that dark road.
I can so relate to what you're saying. I felt exactly the same way with my daughter. I just saw that this is a bad path. And I just thought, well, we're going to have years of struggle, but she'll come out of it. That was kind of what I thought in my head. I never thought it would result in death. It didn't even occur to me, even though I had done, as a reporter, I had done quite a few stories on overdoses and the opioid epidemic and all of these things. Of course, I knew my daughter had used marijuana and Xanax like James, but I had no idea that she had, gone on to heroin. So that was, I was completely blindsided by that. But I just never thought that I think you probably felt the same way. Like that just couldn't happen in my family. It would happen maybe to somebody else, but not in my family.
Absolutely. And we were in a citywide recovery group. So it was huge. There were several areas around Houston that had their own.
Sure. And Houston's a big city. Yeah.
Yes. So there were a lot of kids and families in this program that we were involved in. And I can remember hearing about a couple of kids who had died or overdosed. And my automatic first reaction or thought or feeling was, that is so sad. I'm so sorry for that family, but thank God it's not my kid. When James did pass, I think there was a jolt. There was a thought that just kept replaying in my head over and over. That was, why did I do all this work and go through recovery and fight for these kids if this is the outcome?
Yes.
And
I had that thought too. Well, I had two thoughts. My first thought was, why did I go? I drug her to counselor after counselor. We tried actually outpatient treatment, all kinds of things, punishments, everything you're talking about. We did too. So what was the purpose of going through all of that? Is that what you thought?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And there's times I still think that way. Psychology was always a passion of mine. I loved learning about myself. I loved seeing what I could do as a person. I was in recovery for years, and I became educated in substance abuse, psychology. I ended up getting degrees through college. I ended up becoming a grief recovery specialist and a life coach. So I was always passionate.
When did you become a grief recovery specialist? After James's death or before? After.
And that was that again was on my journey of trying to find some healing. Like I said, I was going through the internet. I found two grief support groups that I started going to. And I was looking around the internet one night and I found something about, it just said grief recovery method is what it said. And I clicked on it and it took me to a place over here by Houston where a gentleman was actually giving an 8-week course on grief recovery. And I signed up immediately and I went to the class all 8 weeks because I enjoyed having that as an option to help me get through some of that grief. I ended up taking a week-long course shortly after and got certified myself to be able to teach the course.
What did you learn in that course that resonated with you or helped you the most? I don't know that there's really recovery from losing a child. So what is it that helped you maybe cope better with the death of James?
There were several other people in the class who had lost somebody significant. So being around them offered me a little comfort and support. I felt not so alone. So that was one aspect of it. But what they were teaching was good. It was good material. It kind of boils down to writing your loved one a letter, and in that letter, getting to express all of the things that you didn't get to express. So I felt that was comforting to me to be able to just on paper say all of these things. Because when my child died so suddenly, there was just a ball of pain sitting there because I had so much I wanted to say and I didn't know how to say it. I didn't know where to go with all this stuff. So just being able to write it out on paper was nice. It helped me get a lot of things off of my chest. It helped me forgive him, forgive myself. I've always journaled. I've always journaled most of my life. So when this class was teaching a lot of journaling methods, it came fairly easy for me. But they just structured it in a little bit of a different way that was more directed toward my love.
And anybody can do that, right? I mean, you don't have to take a class to write a letter to your loved one, and it can be very healing. I started journaling right away after Emily died. And I write anyway, I write my blogs and things like that, but I just poured all my emotion out onto that paper, and I think that was helpful.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And like I said, I've been journaling for 20 something years. It has really been a good tool for me to be able to process emotions or process thoughts or, whatever else is coming. But the grief recovery class was, it kind of took you back a little bit through a chain of events in your past and opened up a door to where you could, say your sorries to that person. You could, or I could make my amends with this person. I could just so many different angles to it, really. And then of course I branched off and did my own style of journaling.
I think everybody's journey is individual, right? Everybody's story, while we have many similarities, especially with addiction and overdose, we have some of the same feelings and some of the same, things that we had to deal with. But yet, what works for one person in terms of trying to reclaim your life doesn't always work for the other person.
My son's best friend recently passed away in January. That I knew the family because they too were in the recovery group.
Also from overdose? Also from overdose as well? Yes.
Yes. I was very insistent upon being there for that family during that time. And I have remained there for them because I just know that when I was going through it, I had a lot of people around, a lot of people that had supported us, come to see me at the house. They were sending gifts. There was nobody that had lost a child. So even though I had a lot of support and a lot of people, I still felt so alone. So when my son's best friend had passed away, I was with the family as much as I possibly could.
And then, when you're going through something like that, like you said, a lot of times people will rally around you initially, but eventually people go on with their lives and they expect you to go on with your life too. And that is easier maybe said than done. And I always say we can move forward, but we'll never move on. It's not like we're going to suddenly be like, well, I'm fine now. I mean, that's just never going to happen, I think, after you've lost a child. What advice do you have after the experiences that you've had and the education you've had for other moms, maybe even and dads who are newer, in this journey than you and I are?
Grief is huge. It can almost be life or death for certain people. My suggestion, and this is pretty much what I did and what I followed, was try not to run away from the pain of it. If you face it, just face the grief, face the pain, go with the flow of it. It does get easier. It never goes away. I still carry the pain today. I always will. But I was never the person that ran away from the pain. I didn't bury my head. I didn't drown myself, with substances. I just got up every day with the intention that I was going to feel this pain because that's where my son was. My son was in the love. He was in the pain. He was in the emotion. And I think really facing it is what helped get me over the big hump of it all. And I'm on a lot of support groups now, online support groups. And I do see a lot of parents that um, they go into depressions and don't come out
I've
or
seen that
can't come
too.
out.
Yeah, I've seen that too. And I feel so horrible. And I just wish I knew how to help them.
Yes. And it's a matter of I wasn't sure that I wanted to live, but I wasn't sure I wanted to die. I know that I have a daughter and a grandson. I have a fiance. I have a family. I have sisters. I
Other people who
so
love you and need you and who would
yeah,
be destroyed if you didn't go on.
that's right. That's right. So I knew on some level I had to go on. Um, it was just trying to figure out how, how to go on. What do I what do I do from day to day? Who am I? That was my big question is who am I now? How do I be how do I how do I become a mom to one child when I'm used to parenting two children? There was just so many bridges to cross through. I can't say I did it great, but I've gotten this far.
I also think our society doesn't really allow the time and the space to process the grief and to figure out what to do with it because we are all supposed to just go on with our lives. We're supposed to jump back in, go back to work, do all these things that we did before. And for some people, that's impossible, right? I mean, I just think our society doesn't give us the breathing room, especially after the loss of a child. People may be understanding for the first year, but then after that, they really do think,
I agree. I agree completely. It's, James died October 13th. I stayed home from work for about a month. And in November, I went back to work and I worked November and December, which were pretty busy months because I work in the medical field. And so I guess for those 3 months, October, November, December, I was able to stay pretty busy. With the holidays, I went overboard at buying holiday stuff that was all about my son. I did a lot of traditional things and directed it toward my son. And I think after the holidays were over in January is when a lot of it really hit me, and it affected my job tremendously to the point where I had I had to take a leave of absence because I was kind of getting to the point where I was ready to just throw in the towel on everything. And I'm glad that I took that time for me to recalibrate. I just needed my world to stop, and I think by me taking a semester off from school and kind of shutting the world out and letting me just grieve helped me tremendously.
and I believe everyone is different with that, but I took 3 months off and I have a job, very public job. And I know I would have crumbled under the weight of that job. And I took 3 months off. And I think that really was helpful to me. Now I spoke to another mom who's a nurse and she's like, well, it helps me to help other people and focus on my job. So
Yeah.
everyone is maybe a little, I also have talked to two mothers who lost their jobs after the death of a child because they couldn't get back in the game. So I think, yeah, it varies for everybody. It helps to have an understanding employer and somebody who is willing to hang in with you, can see the value in hanging in with you. That doesn't always happen. Where are you now in this grief journey? And have you found any sort of peace?
I have. And a lot of that piece has come from my journaling, just being able to write and really drop down and get into the emotions and the feelings and the pain and the fear. Just facing a lot of that opened up a lot of doors. When James passed, like I said, I was searching everywhere, the internet, books, people, meetings, churches, friends, whatever I could find. I was just looking for anything to heal my heart. And it wasn't until I guess I came across, I had read many books, probably 30, 40 books during this time, trying to relate or find something that touched me. and I ended up coming across a book that was different. It was a little different for me, but I was very attracted to the ideas in the book. It helped me, this book ended up helping me or teaching me, I guess, how to cross over to the other side. And I did it willingly. I was very interested in learning how to do this. And
What's the name of the book, Janet?
the name of the book is called Where Did You Go?
You found this book, Where Did You Go? And I think that we all want to know where our children are. I think we all want to know what happened to them. I think any mother would be interested in that. So you read this book, Where Did You Go by Christina Rasmussen.
She had actually lost her husband to cancer, and she has a background in science. So the book was really based more about a scientific journey rather than like a spiritual or
So
faith-based journey.
what do you think happens after we die? Where do you think James is now?
Oh, I know James is right here with me. I've already met him. I've seen him. I've touched him. I've hugged him. He's definitely right here.
Through this book, the message that you got was what?
The message that I got was that our kids we're all just energy. We are all energy. We are our soul, our brain waves, our heartbeat. A lot of that is energy based. Our soul, our spirits, the core of what makes us who we are is energy based. And I started questioning, does that energy, does it die? I mean, I understand the physical body dies, but where's his soul? Where's his spirit? Where is my son? And when I started reading this book, she laid it out she just laid it out very clearly on the steps to take to cross over and meet your loved one. And the first time that I had tried the exercise, or
is it a type of meditation?
it's kind of a visualization technique mixed with maybe some meditation. It's a process on how to heighten your senses, heighten your hearing and your visualization, your touch. And so there is a little bit of a process in trying to heighten those areas. And she gives the view of a door. That is where the crossing over kind of takes place, is just visualizing a door, wherever that door could be. It can be your bedroom door, your kitchen door, or a kitchen out a door out in the sky. And the first time that I had gone through the door, of course, in my mind, in my body, I could see my son. He was standing right there waiting for me on the other side of the door. And in my experience, this was very real to me because I could feel his body. I could smell him. I could feel his clothing. It was just such a real experience for me. And I was crying, just crying so hard that I couldn't really say a whole lot, but I have now since gone back through the door many times and I've had very long conversations with my son. He has explained quite a bit about his experience.
And how has this helped you with the rest of your life? Has it helped in other areas of your life? Has it helped you find meaning again? Because I think that is one of the things that as parents, we wonder what the meaning of it all is. How are we ever going to enjoy life again?
It completely removed the panic that I had been living with. Because I guess after he died, panic set in, stress set in, fear set in. I just felt like I was in panic mode all the time, trying to find a way to cope. And when I was able to make that connection, I noticed immediately how everything had just softened. Everything had calmed down inside my body. I felt a sense of relief that now I know now I know how to connect with my son. And it relieved a tremendous amount of anxiety and fear.
And I think that there could be many spiritual paths to what you're talking about, right? Some people may find it in their religion. Some people may find it. I had a medium on this podcast once. Some people may find it that way, or through an exercise, a visualization exercise that they find in a book. But there is definitely a spiritual factor, a spiritual quest that we all go on as parents, wanting to know what happened to our children and where did they go? Are they okay? And finding those answers, we may find them in different ways, but I think we all have that longing.
And I know that my experience with going through the door or crossing over is very different than what a lot of other people have experienced or even what they believe. I've always been very open-minded to understanding whatever's out there. I'm okay with. I don't really have a strong religious background, but I do know that there is something bigger than us here. You know, it's just, and I think for me, it was that little piece of the pie that made sense. And since I was able to find that little piece that made sense to me, I felt like I could now start to build around that.
And I think the transformation of the death of a child, I mean, we are all transformed in one way or the other. Sometimes it's a negative transformation. I'm not saying it's always a positive transformation, but if we can try to find the lifeline in it, right? If we can just try to find the things that help us grow rather than shut down, that is the key.
And I knew instinctively if I was to shut down and bury my head, I would die. I knew that. I also knew that on some level, my son still needed me. He still needed me. Even in his death, I still had to show up to be his mom. I still had to carry his name forward. I had to carry his message forward. I still had to carry and bring my son forward. And so I always knew that even in death, he still needed me.
And October is the month, anniversary month of James's death. What is his message, do you think? Or what about him? What is his legacy? What would you like people to know?
His legacy is that he was a very vibrant, energetic, creative, beautiful person. He always had such a creative mind, and I don't know if there really is a big difference between a boy and a girl, but he was far more creative, and he would come up with such outlandish ideas for things or to build things or put things together. Or, I mean, I was running around constantly trying to figure out what he was up to, what he was going to build, what he was going to create. And as he got older, he was just that kid that was always happy. He was a happy person, ready to get involved with whatever was there. He did have a sense of loving life. And it's just such a shame that these kids.
His life mattered. His life mattered, and how he was and who he was mattered more than his death. And I think that's something that we all, as parents, really want people to know, that our children mattered.
Absolutely. Yes, he did matter. And I didn't always want people to focus on the overdose or his addiction, because he was a person. He's a person, and he's a great person. The same way a lot of people are who are struggling with addiction.
I mean, everybody, the addiction does not define someone as a person.
It doesn't. And it's just sad to see so many people who are struggling get dismissed or judged or undervalued. It's not fair, but I understand that it is our society. It's what people do.
By talking about it, you and I and thousands of other moms and dads, we're changing that. That's what we're doing here. We're changing that because our kids mattered. How they died does not define them. And we need to make sure this doesn't happen to more families. I mean, that's probably one of the reasons why you wanted to be there for your son's friends' family. You know, this shouldn't be happening. This shouldn't continue to happen. And I so appreciate you sharing James's story, letting me tell it through the podcast, through you. And we're going to remember him this October.
And I am so grateful that you gave me this opportunity, especially during his 3-year anniversary month. This is very special.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining me for this latest edition of Grieving Out Loud. If you're enjoying the podcast, please consider giving a positive review. Wishing you faith, hope, and courage.